Delegates traveled to Rome this week to meet with the Pope and ask for an apology. The visit comes on the heels of the discovery of 1,300 potential unmarked graves of children at residential schools across the country. Our next guest is traveling with the delegation, a journalist with the Canadian Press. We welcome Geraldine Malone onto the program. Kelly, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So we're Wednesday here. How has the trip gone so far?
It's been really full trip, and I think that's probably emotionally heavy as well as a lot of things scheduled. We arrived in Rome early Sunday morning, and by Monday it was already the time for Métis and Inuit delegates to head to the Vatican for their meetings with the Pope. And then obviously yesterday they had tours of the Vatican Museum, which is also an emotionally weighty endeavor. And today, I think a few are taking a break, but there is a tour of Assisi before tomorrow when the First Nations delegates are set to meet with the Pope.
I know we've talked a lot about apologies and wanting apologies, but what would you say are the main goals of this trip by 32 First Nations and Inuit Métis delegates?
Well, I think each group has expressed that they would like to receive an apology for the Catholic Church's role in residential schools in Canada. The Métis and Inuit groups were not shocked that they didn't obviously get the apology on Monday. I think if, there's been conversations happening around here, and I think people say if it is to come here, it's probably Friday. And it might not even be the apology itself, but more of a commitment for an apology on Canadian soil. But they are making it really clear, as you said, that there are more things that they want to discuss with Pope Francis. A lot of that has to do with what are the Church's roles in reconciliation, and what does that mean on the ground, front line, with Catholics around Canada. And then also on top of that, they want more access to documents and things that can explain a bit more about what happened in residential schools. And obviously each group has its own relationship with the Church, and so they have specifics that they were talking about that are specific to what they experienced with the Roman Catholic Church.
This is not the first time Indigenous groups have asked for an apology from the Roman Catholic Church for their role in running residential schools. But is there a sign that this time, in 2022, it will be different this time, that things will go differently?
I was talking with Phil Fontaine, who's the former national chief of the Assembly of First Nations, who really brought the issue of residential schools to light in 1990 when he came forward with his own experiences at residential school of abuse. And he was actually part of the 2009 delegation to speak with Pope Benedict and ask for an apology, which obviously they did not get. Now, speaking with him yesterday, and I said, is this a bookend? Do you think this will be that journey finally coming to a close? And he said he is very hopeful. He is under the impression that this delegation is part of the journey that will end with Pope Francis coming to Canada and delivering an apology on Canadian soil. So he is under that impression that while it might not come during the delegation, it is certainly the expectation that that will be the result of this journey.
We are with Geraldine Malone, journalist for the Canadian Press. She is with the Indigenous delegation that has traveled to Rome this week. Let's talk about the Vatican that has a large collection of Indigenous artifacts in its archives. What would the delegates like done with these items?
That was a really interesting conversation I had with delegates yesterday after they toured the museum. I think a lot of them were quite conflicted about what they saw. Some were very clear that they want the Vatican museums to be transparent about what they have and then work on repatriating the objects. They say reconciliation and repatriation have to go hand in hand. Others, said that there was almost a sense of feeling at home when they were around them, and it was strange because they felt so out of place in Rome. It didn't seem like anywhere they'd ever been before. But then when they went into the museums, there was a sense of home and whether someone else should have those belongings. But then there's also kind of a comfort in feeling home when you're away, especially obviously going through the emotional roller coaster that is this delegation. I think that a lot of them will take what they saw back to their communities and then maybe have further conversations there about what needs to be done. I don't think any were, a couple were pretty solid if they need to be repatriated, but a lot said this is something, they took photos, they took in as much information as they can, and it's something they're going to bring back to their communities and then get guidance from there.
Well, let's talk, before we wrap up, about Pope Francis and what else is expected on Thursday and Friday with this delegation and any other further meetings. What can you tell us?
Well, Thursday will be the First Nations delegates going in. There's 12 delegates, and they'll have an hour-long meeting. I have spoken with the delegates, and they're fairly organized. I think they took a lot of lessons away from the 2009 meeting about making it very clear what their expectations are of the church. So they will share stories, but they are also going to share their expectations, and they're going to leave a document behind that lays out what they expect, including that trip to Canada with an apology, making documents accessible, among other things that involve, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's calls to action. After that, there'll be kind of a cultural event, I guess I would call it, but some dancing, some performance being organized with some people outside the Vatican or outside St. Peter's Square tomorrow night. But I think a lot of delegates will really be preparing themselves for Friday, which is a much more public and maybe in that controlled environment where all three groups will be going with Pope Francis. And many of the delegates are thinking at that time they'll see a commitment for an apology, but obviously there's nothing confirmed as of now.
And that's interesting how you put it there. So perhaps on Friday we will see a commitment to an apology and not the apology itself happening this week.
I think that's a possibility, and I think many of the delegates are preparing themselves for that. There's a mix of emotions. There's a lot of people feeling very hopeful and good about what's happening here, and maybe just that they are representing their communities well as well. But there's also some people that understand that at home there is some backlash to the delegation too. So I think Friday will be history no matter what ends up happening.
Geraldine Malone is a journalist with the Canadian Press, has been in Rome and the Vatican this week. Kelly, thank you so much for taking the time for us this morning.
Thank you.